Welcome to the deep dive. You're with us for a philosophical exploration today. We're aiming to get you up to speed on some pretty big ideas quickly and show you how different thinkers looked at the world.
Yeah, our mission is really to get into the ideas of two, well, philosophical heavyweights, Immanuel Kant and Karl Popper. We'll look at where they clash and maybe where they, surprisingly overlap a bit.
Exactly. We've got Kant from the 18th century, right in the Enlightenment, and then Popper, a 20th century guy dealing with very modern science issues. Different times, different contexts.
Definitely.
Sure.
But they both tackle these huge questions. What can we actually know? How does science really work? And how should we live together in society?
So to make sense of it all, we're going to compare them across four main areas. First, how we know things, that's epistemology.
Right. Then their philosophy of science. After that, their take on metaphysics, the nature of reality itself.
And finally, we'll look at their ideas on ethics and society. Should give you a good handle on where they stand.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's dive in. Epistemology, the theory of knowledge. Kant. What was his basic idea about where knowledge comes from?
Kant's view is, well, fascinating. He argued it's not just about sensory experience flooding in what he called a posteriori knowledge.
Right, knowledge after experience.
Exactly. He said our minds aren't blank slates. They come with pre-installed structures, a priori categories, he called them. These actively shape how we understand everything we experience.
So the mind isn't just passive, it's actively organizing things.
Precisely. Knowledge comes from this interaction, this mix between what our senses tell us and these built-in mental frameworks.
Okay, so like seeing a chair isn't just light hitting my eye. My mind already has a concept of object or thingness it applies.
That's the idea. And this leads to a really key, maybe slightly humbling concept for Kant about truth. He distinguished between the phenomenon.
The world as it appears to us.
Yes, reality is filtered and structured by our minds. And the noumenon, the thing in itself.
What reality really is, independent of us.
Right. And Kant basically said, we can't access that noumenon directly. Our knowledge is limited to the phenomenal realm, the world as we structure it, ultimate reality, off limits for human understanding, essentially.
Wow. Okay, that's
Yeah.
a big limitation.
Mm.
So if we're stuck in the phenomenal world, how did Kant think we could be sure about any knowledge at all?
Well, his idea of transcendental idealism comes in here. He argued that because these fundamental mental structures are universal to human minds.
We all have the same basic operating system, so to speak.
Kind of, yeah. So the knowledge we build within that phenomenal world, shaped by these common structures, has a kind of shared validity. It's reliable for us, even if it doesn't capture the thing in itself.
Okay, I think I'm getting Kant's picture. Now, Popper. How did his view on knowledge stack up against this idea of built-in mental structures?
No, Popper went a completely different way. He thought all knowledge starts with conjectures, basically. Educated guesses or hypotheses about the world based on observation.
So, less about innate structures, more about starting with ideas.
Yes, and crucially, Popper stressed that we can never be absolutely certain about these conjectures, no matter how much evidence seems to support them.
No certainty. So, how do we get anywhere?
By trying to prove our guesses wrong. That's the key for Popper. Progress towards truth, or something closer to it, doesn't come from confirming theories, but from rigorously trying to falsify them.
Ah, falsification. That's his big idea in science, right?
Absolutely, it's central. Science, for Popper, is this constant process of proposing bold theories and then doing everything possible to shoot them down through testing. We learn by finding our errors.
So, if absolute certainty is impossible, where does any confidence in our knowledge come from, according to Popper?
It doesn't come from a foundation, like Kant's mental structures. It comes from how well our theories survive relentless attempts to disprove them. A theory's strength is in its resilience to falsification.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core difference seems huge. Kant's saying the mind actively builds our reality from the start, using its own blueprints.
It's constructive.
Whereas Popper sees the mind as more of a guesser, constantly making maps, and then, importantly, looking for where those maps fail.
That's a great way to put it. Kant emphasizes the mind's architecture. Popper emphasizes its fallibility and the need for criticism.
Right. Okay, let's move on to the philosophy of science specifically. We've touched on Popper's falsification, but what about Kant's view of science?
Kant was writing when Newtonian physics was, the absolute pinnacle of science. It deeply influenced him. He saw science as the job of rationally explaining the universal necessary laws governing nature.
So science is about using reason to find these deep, unchanging laws. like uncovering the universe's rulebook.
Pretty much. He had immense faith in the power of reason to grasp these fundamental principles. There was a sense of necessity, of universality to these laws, which kind of mirrored the structure he thought our minds had.
Okay. Now, Popper's view of science, how did that differ from Kant's idea of discovering these inherent laws?
Well, as we said, Popper flips it. Theories can't be proven true, only falsified. So for him, what makes something scientific is whether it makes claims that could be proven wrong by some observation or experiment.
It has to be testable, specifically testably wrong.
Exactly. If a theory explains everything and can't possibly be falsified, it's not really science for Popper. Science is this dynamic, ongoing process of critical questioning and correcting errors. It's built on recognizing our own fallibility,
Right, that we might be wrong.
and that finding out where we're wrong is how we actually make progress. We replace weaker theories with ones that can withstand tougher tests.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So Kant sees science as this almost majestic unfolding of reason, revealing the universe's secrets.
Yeah, a testament to our rational power.
But Popper paints it as this much more humble, step-by-step process, questioning, testing, finding flaws, trying again, constantly challenging itself.
That's a perfect contrast. Kant gives reason a constitutive role. It helps build our scientific understanding. Popper gives reason a critical role. Its main job is to challenge and test that understanding.
Okay, let's switch gears again. Metaphysics. Those big questions about ultimate reality. What was Kant's take?
Kant thought metaphysics, thinking about God, the soul, the universe's origin, was like a natural human urge. We can't help asking these questions.
But each given his limits on knowledge.
Exactly. He argued that because these questions go beyond possible experience into that noumenal realm, we can't achieve theoretical certainty about them. Reason gets tied in knots when it tries to make definitive claims about things we can't experience.
So what did he do with concepts like God or free will? Did he just dismiss them?
Not entirely. He moved them into the realm of practical reason, the sphere of morality. He argued we sort of need to assume things like freedom, God, and immortality to make sense of our moral lives, even if we can't prove them scientifically.
Interesting. So they have a role, but it's more ethical than factual.
Kind of, yeah. And his overall metaphysical stance remained transcendental idealism. Reality as we know it is mind-structured.
Right. Now, Popper on metaphysics, was he more dismissive?
Oh, much more so from a scientific standpoint. His main criterion was falsifiability. Metaphysical claims like God exists or everything is ultimately one generally can't be empirically tested to be potentially proven false.
So for Popper, they're simply not science.
Pretty much. He wouldn't necessarily say they're meaningless, though. He acknowledged they could have cultural importance or even inspire scientific ideas down the line. But if you can't test it, you can't falsify it, it's outside the scientific game.
And he definitely rejected Kant's transcendental idealism.
Oh, absolutely. Popper was an empiricist in the sense that he believed all claims about the world should ultimately be answerable to empirical evidence and testing.
So what does this all mean? It feels like Kant tried to maybe preserve space for metaphysics even with limits?
Yeah, he cordoned it off but kept it on the map.
While Popper drew a much sharper line. If it's not testable, it's not knowledge in the scientific sense.
Exactly. Kant limits metaphysics. Popper largely excludes it from the realm of empirical knowledge.
Okay, final area. Ethics and society. How did they approach morality and the ideal community? Let's start with Kant again.
Kant's ethics are really famous for the categorical imperative. It's his fundamental moral principle.
Right, I've heard of that. What's the gist?
The most common formulation is, act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Basically, before you do something, ask yourself, could I honestly want everyone to act this way in this situation? The answer is yes, and there's no logical contradiction, then the action is morally permissible. It has to be universalizable.
So morality comes from reason, and it applies to everyone, always.
That's Kant's view. It's universal, necessary, and derived purely from reason, not from consequences or feelings or trained commands. It's a priori morality.
And how did this translate into his view of society?
He envisioned an ideal society, sometimes called a kingdom of ends, made up of rational individuals all respecting each other's autonomy and acting according to these universal moral laws. A society based on reason and mutual respect.
Okay. Now, Popper. How did his ethical and societal views compare to Kant's focus on universal reason?
Popper brought his critical rationalism and fallibility into ethics, too. He didn't go for absolute, a priori moral laws like Kant. He thought moral systems, like scientific theories, should be treated more like conjectures.
So open to criticism and change.
Exactly. We should be able to discuss them, evaluate them based on their consequences, and be willing to revise them. It's more pragmatic, more trial and error. He emphasized open discussion and critical assessment of different moral ideas.
And this links to his idea of the open society, I imagine.
Directly, the open society was Popper's ideal. It's a society that values individual freedom, diversity of thought, pluralism, and, crucially, critical thinking. It's a society that allows institutions and policies to be criticized and changed peacefully, as opposed to closed societies, which he saw as tribal, totalitarian, or dogmatic societies that suppress dissent and claim to have found the final, unchangeable truth. He was deeply concerned about the historical threat posed by those kinds of societies.
So the key difference here, Kant's ethics are absolute, grounded in pure reason, universal principles.
Right, top down from reason.
While Popper's are more practical, critical, focused on avoiding negative outcomes and building a society that allows for ongoing criticism and improvement, more bottom-up, maybe?
Yeah, more focused on the process and the societal framework that allows for ethical progress through criticism rather than discovering fixed, eternal rules. Kant's is foundational. Popper's is procedural and critical.
Okay, this has been a lot. Let's try to quickly summarize the contrasts we've seen across these four areas.
Good idea. So first, basis of knowledge. Kant mixes reason, experience, and those mental structures. Popper emphasizes experience plus ongoing criticism and falsification.
Right, an approach to truth. For Kant, ultimate truth, noumenon, is unknowable, but our structured experience is coherent. For Popper, truth is unattainable maybe, but we keep getting closer by finding errors.
Metaphysics. Kant saw it as limited by experience, but a natural, maybe necessary inclination. Popper viewed it as unscientific because it's not falsifiable, so maybe culturally relevant.
Okay. Ethics. Kant's are rational, universal, based on that a priori categorical imperative. Popper's are more critical, historical, practical think, trial and error, and open debate.
And finally, society. Kant's ideal is based on universal reason and moral duty. Popper champions the open society. Pluralistic, valuing freedom, and critical thinking above all.
It's really striking how these two massive thinkers approach these fundamental issues from such different angles.
It really is. And understanding these different frameworks, it gives you, the listener, some powerful tools for thinking about how we know what we know and how we even approach the idea of truth.
Yeah, and even though they differ so much, both Kant and Popper offer really valuable ways to think critically about the world, about science, about society.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to maybe chew on. Which perspective resonates more with you? Kant's view of the mind, structure and reality within certain limits, or Popper's emphasis on constant questioning, fallibility, and inching towards truth by finding errors?
And how might leaning one way or the other actually influence how you evaluate claims, how you approach disagreements, or just how you make sense of information in your own life?
Something to think about.